The film opens in a jail where a man in a shirt meets a criminal boss called Lee with the help of police officers. The guy in the shirt shows him images of the kids he's killed and warns to make him endure for his actions tomorrow. An officer is stabbed in the neck by a different prisoner while he is cleaning the floors. He took the dagger from the pail. The prisoner then murders a second police officer with a pistol. A shootout ensues, during which the prisoner murders a few security personnel but is fatally injured. The guy in the shirt is knocked out cold by Lee after he takes him by the head and slams against the door. Lee then manages to extricate himself and issue the guy a challenge to a duel. The guy is hurt and is unable to resist Lee, so he collapses to the ground. The other captives are then set free by Lee, who advises them to grab their firearms and flee. The officers and inmates soon come face to face. There is a deadly firefight that results in the deaths of all the male participants. Lee then makes an appearance and leaves the jail. 2 months later, the main character of the movie, a guy in a coma, is being treated by Dr. Eileen in a tiny island's outlying hospital. His roots and identity are unclear. When he finally awakens, he unintentionally gets out of bed. When Eileen awakens, she starts to inspect the man. Unfortunately, he can't even recall his identity or how he got hurt. He adopts the name Ishmael as a consequence, which comes from the novel Moby Dick that Eileen is reading. Ishmael experiences very short memories in which he witnesses a woman shooting him in the face as he examines himself in the mirror. After the doctors look at him, Eileen provides him some fresh clothing. Ishmael starts to feel better over the following few days and spends an increasing amount of time with Eileen. Eileen admits that he was discovered on the shore by a local as they unwind on the sand. A criminal leader called Anto and his sidekick Bondi become the center of the action. Lee is needed for some work, but the last one is running late. Anto is furious, but Bondi begs him to hold back. When Lee shows up, Anto is direct and tells him he no longer wants to work with him because the goods he buys from him are of poor quality. Hand-to-hand fighting between competing gang members breaks out outside in the meantime. In the end, Lee's guy Baysai effortlessly dispatches Anto's goons. Another Lee henchwoman named Rika attacks Anto's lackey with a dagger before engaging the other men in combat. Lee stabs Anto in the neck with chopsticks after Anto takes a pistol from his pocket and attempts to shoot Lee. Then Lee grabs Anto's pistol and shoots the rival gang's final men. Bondi tells him something important just as he is about to murder him. He tells him that Ishmael, a member of Lee's group, has lived. Lee gunshots him in the ear and orders him to the hospital to look into Ishmael. Bondi goes to the infirmary and becomes violent. Bondi strikes the security officer who intervenes. Then Eileen comes and attends to his ear. Bondi inquires as to where Ishmael is, but she refuses to disclose his location. He then threatens her, but thankfully Ishmael shows up and seizes his hand. Then Bondi grabs a glass container and tosses it at his head, knocking him unconscious. Bondi, who is being shoved against the wall, takes out a gun, but he snatches the ammunition magazine instead. Bondi immediately flees after becoming frightened by his skills. Ishmael recommends joining Eileen in Jakarta as they move through the city together. He has bullet pieces inside his cranium, which can be removed during operation in Jakarta, and the hospital is no longer a secure location. He says that before he can join her, he needs to figure out who he is and what occurred to him. The following day, he goes with her to the bus stop. Inside the car, Lee's goons are observing them. The goons begin to pursue the bus as soon as it leaves, believing he is inside. He chooses to travel with a guy on a moped instead. Later, Lee's soldiers halt the bus while searching for Ishmael. The driver is instantly assassinated, and after that, a search party boards the bus. Ishmael is informed of the situation by Eileen over the phone. Soon, all of the commuters are being shot by the goons. Eileen and a young child are the only survivors. When a henchman is about to murder the young girl, Eileen emerges from concealment and pleads not to. She responds that Ishmael remained in town when Bondi inquires about where he is. Ishmael rides a bicycle to the bus. He looks around inside but can't locate Eileen anywhere. Soon, Lee's men board the bus to set the corpses on fire and destroy the proof. The antagonist breaks the assassin's limb as he attempts to murder Ishmael with a blade. Ishmael gets covered in gasoline by a different thug who also tries to ignite the lighter by pushing him away. Ishmael catches up to the subordinate and shoots him in the eye as he attempts to take up the lighter. A second minion then comes in, holds a candle, and tosses it to the floor. Ishmael breaks the rear window and exits the vehicle. He then has to combat a different creature that is attempting to force Ishmael onto the bus. After defeating him, he slams the skull of another henchman to death, killing them. Soon after, he is struck in the head by officers who have just arrived behind him, putting him unconscious. Eileen and the young girl are taken to Lee's jail by Lee's henchmen. As Bondi starts to speak too much and arrogantly, the henchmen shoot and murder him. The protagonist awakens in a questioning area. Although he insists that he is only searching for his buddy Eileen, he is accused of killing every passenger on the bus. The Interpol official continues by describing how children were abducted by Lee's network and taught to be devoted smugglers and criminal guards, with Ishmael being one of them. The official says that although they were able to apprehend Lee when he was walking around without a firearm or bodyguard, he was able to flee. The official also displays a picture of Lee and Ishmael together in a dining establishment. The primary character claims he has no memories, and then all of a sudden, the light disappears. When the official steps up to investigate, a machete is thrown through the window and kills him. In an effort to murder Ishmael, Lee's gang of assassins is attacking the police station. Ishmael protects himself with the table he is tied to after the henchman with the blade enters and attempts to murder him. After pushing the assassin with the table, he uses his own blade to slice off his head. He conceals behind the table as an explosive is suddenly thrown into the police station. Ishmael emerges from behind the shooters as they approach the scene of the detonation to see if he is dead and shoots them. Later, Ishmael makes an attempt to flee but is stopped by Lee's goons at the door. Ishmael arrives in time to conceal as they begin firing. Then the goons broke off to look for him separately. A brawl results from him coming up behind one of them. The henchman begins shooting as he shelters under a table. The protagonist pounces on him and tackles him to the ground when he runs out of ammunition. He engages the subordinate in hand-to-hand fighting before shooting him in the face. Ishmael finally puts a stop to it all by bringing down the last of the henchmen. Ishmael experiences memories following the battle in which he witnesses the two minions he just dispatched. They were pals back when he used to work for Lee. Lee contacts his henchman's phone while in Eileen to ask him not to murder Ishmael. Ishmael answers the phone, much to his astonishment, and claims to still be living. Eileen is grabbed by the throat by Lee, who then hits his shoulder with shears. After yanking them away, he lets go of his hold. We witness memories from Ishmael's time spent practicing with Lee's goons as he approaches Lee. Ishmael enters a forest and wanders until he finds a well. There he encounters Baysai and discovers that Rika and Ishmael Baysai shared a training ground. By placing the kids in the well, Lee would suffocate them. After a few days, he would discard the food, and the person who had murdered everyone else for food would be fired. Baysai, out of devotion, rejects Ishmael's attempts to persuade her not to back Lee. The two start fighting, and Ishmael wins by hitting Baysai in the head with a strong strike. Baysai walks to the shore, realizing he is about to expire, and dies as he observes the landscape. Ishmael pursues him to the shore, but Rika emerges behind him and begins shooting as he escapes. She finds Baysai's corpse and then chases Ishmael. Ishmael tosses sand in her face and snatches her pistol when she discovers him. At that point, he recalls Rika shooting him and putting him in a slumber. He commands her to transport him to Lee, but she refuses and dares him to a battle. Despite Rika's multiple wounds, Ishmael ultimately wins. He then begs her to halt because he doesn't want to kill anymore. She takes advantage of his distraction and draws out a gun, but she is unable to fire him again. In a frenzy, he fatally wounds her with a dagger. He consoles her in her final minutes, then phones Lee and tells him that he now remembers everything. Ishmael then finds Lee's lair. Meanwhile, a henchman is about to attack Eileen in the hideaway. The lady stops him by hurling a dish at his head, and Eileen cuts him with a fragment of the shattered plate. Eileen then takes the automatic weapon and murders the subordinate. They exit the building and murder another accomplice. While fleeing, Eileen encounters other minions, but luckily, Ishmael comes and kills them. They meet, and Eileen originally antagonizes Ishmael because of their previous connection, which resulted in her imprisonment. They hug after he persuades her that he has changed from the guy he once was.
Lee, on the other hand, shows up and is enraged that Ishmael murdered his faves, Baysai and Rika.
Following that, the two get into a rough battle, which Lee eventually wins thanks to his strength and expertise.
He finally strikes Ishmael repeatedly in the head, knocking him unconscious.
Lee then charges at him and attempts to strike him, but he manages to avoid it.
Ishmael eventually succeeds in taking the initiative.
Nevertheless, Lee manages to flee outside as he collapses to the ground fatigued. He is being pursued by the main character, and the battle has returned to the forest.
All of this culminates in Ishmael impaling Lee on a jagged limb of a tree stem.
Lee attempts to murder Ishmael one last time by impaling him on the same trunk, but Eileen rescues him.
Lee succumbs to his injuries and expires. Eileen is recovering in the infirmary, while Ishmael remains critically wounded.
He does, however, awaken with Eileen by his side, and she grins at him.
The movie ends here.
Please like and subscribe my channel.